Let's get going. SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter says South Africa is facing its worst ever economic period. He says the country's economy's structural faults, including inequality and unemployment, are key reasons for the current situation. The Revenue Service has given an update on the impact of the coronavirus on revenue collection.
We could potentially face a revenue under-recovery of up to 285 billion. Now, my job is not to revise the revenue estimate. That the Minister of Finance will do when he announces a budget update. But for us, our day job is the domestic mobilization, the mobilization of domestic resources, and so therefore we point this out as a huge revenue risk. We've just had 1 month, and so from the preliminary assessment of revenue performance, I can share with you the following. That we have had an under-recovery in the first month of 9 billion, which represents a year-on-year decline of 8.8%. The main drivers of this under-recovery are as follows. For pay-as-you-earn, we are down 5.2% compared to the same period prior year. This is made up of just over 65,000 employers who have made payments in April 2019 but have made no payments in the corresponding month of 2020, a tax value of 3.8 billion. There's also just over 87,000 employers who have made payments in April 2019 but have made lower payments in the corresponding month of 2020 with a tax value of 6.1 billion.
Let's stay with that story and speak to the SARS Commissioner himself, Edward Kieswetter, joining us by Skype tonight. Commissioner, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for being with us. Your visor is quite a hit with our viewers. Let's get to the serious stuff. You painted quite a bleak picture in your presentation this afternoon. How worried should we all be about the revenue situation, both in the immediate and long term?
Well, I think at a time, Tembekile, where government really needs every cent it can muster to really take care of the poor and the most vulnerable in society, to give businesses the relief, to give it a lease of life, and all of the other needs, we should be very worried. We headed into the COVID-19 crisis already with a struggling economy, a loss of jobs, and businesses already filing for rescue. So we didn't start on a strong footing, and we have seen in the last 6 weeks that has just gone in many ways accelerated. We've seen, for example, the year-on-year retrenchments increased by 10% just for the month of April from the directives we've seen filed for. We've seen businesses that last year contributed towards both income taxes but also towards consumption taxes. The businesses have just said, we don't have any money to pay. And so, to your fundamental question, we should be worried for two reasons. Firstly, the downturn or the slowdown in economic activities, which reduces the consumption taxes. But the more worrying factor is the loss of productive capacity. When you lose a job, it's much harder to replace it. When a business goes down, it's much harder to rebuild a new business. And so in the short term, we will suffer from the consumption and profit taxes. But in the longer term, we stand to lose a lot more because it's going to take time. We already have a country with 10 million unemployed. That's going to go up to 15 or 16 million, if not worse. Businesses that will go under now may never come back again. And so we really should be worried. The number we shared with the public today, albeit an early model from the first month of actual revenue collections, it is fairly aligned with Treasury's view that we'll see a contraction in our economy by between 5 and 16%.
Mm-hmm. So you've now announced these tax incentives, rebates, if you will, for both individuals and businesses. Just given that picture that you've painted, how sustainable are those going to be, given that we're not going to see an immediate economic recovery from the impact of COVID-19? How long, I suppose, can we keep those going?
Well, you know, the hard reality that we have to deal with as South Africans is if we don't contain the spread of the virus, and if we are incapable of dealing with the health and mortality outcomes, then there will not be a stimulus package big enough to save us. I mean, that's the reality. So whilst on the one hand we are continuing to minimize the health and mortality impact, we have to free up the economy, because you don't want to leave people with a choice of dying of the virus or dying of hunger. And so we have to find that fine balance, and that's the whole basis of a risk-based approach to dealing with this. Now, the concerns that we have is where we suffer a loss of future income earning capacity, it has a direct bearing on not only on the economic well-being, but also on tax revenues, which just compromises government even more when it has an expenditure profile that has gone one way and a revenue profile that has gone the opposite way. We also still are suffering with the deep structural inequalities of our past. We still are a country with the highest level of inequality, high levels of unemployment, high levels of youth unemployment. These are scary factors which already challenged us ahead of COVID-19, and COVID-19 has just revealed all of our deficiencies as a country and as a young democracy. And if this doesn't wake us up, nothing will.
Still on revenue then, Commissioner, there's been the ongoing debate, of course, about the tax that's being lost, sin tax being lost on the sale of alcohol and tobacco. Today you gave a presentation to the Parliamentary Committee on Finance, and one of the MPs there, the chairperson of that committee, Joe Masanganyi, being quoted in one of the papers today saying that we should not be emotional about the alcohol and cigarette ban, as they only account for 3.2% of money that is collected by SARS. Is that figure correct? And are we making too much of the loss of revenue from those two things?
I don't think we are making too much about it. So remember, Timokeli, I don't stand in a value judgment on whether or not the decision to ban alcohol sales and cigarette sales is correct. Certainly in my job, my job is to administer the law, not to make the law. But here are my concerns. So on the one hand, the chairman of the Standing Committee on Finance is correct that in relative terms, the loss of revenue should not be our biggest concern. Although I have a view that says every rand of revenue in this time is necessary. We reported a revenue loss just from the excise on sales of tobacco and alcohol of 1.7 billion. And that is significant. It can cover a big hole. But our real reason for pointing this out to the committee today and to the South African public at large, but also to the decision makers who make the decisions around lockdown, is to say that unfortunately this has given the opportunity for the illicit and criminal activity to thrive. We've just created a huge market for them. In fact, they make more money than they normally do, because you now can buy a packet of cigarettes between 50 Rand or 63 Rand. You can buy beer, at 3, 4, 5 times the price.
Commissioner, allow me to come in there just on the illicit trade of tobacco, for example. Is part of the reason why it's flourishing not because there's been such a decades-long failure to get it under control, because even though you're saying they may be seeing an increase in sales, the illicit tobacco trade has always been quite a profitable one.
You are absolutely right. And we have, as a society, as a country, we have not stepped up. In fact, sadly, in the last 10 years, we have argued about whether or not SARS should have the capacity to go after these illicit and syndicated activities. Well, I can give you the assurance that we are determined to improve our capability to investigate and to respond to that. We are obviously reliant on our sister agencies in the police force, SAPS, SIU. We work very closely with the NPA. But yes, all of us have to step up our collective efforts to deal with one of the biggest scourges in our economy, which is the parallel economy that is mustered and mastered by criminals who blazonly go out and defraud the fiscus, but also distort our economy. So you're right, it is not a new problem. What we are simply saying is the unintended consequences of the lockdown is it has given them a boost and entrenched them deeper into the real economy.